Looking at this Polaris Outlaw 525, these things get looked over, I think, some just because of the style they are and that they're made by Polaris. I mean, Polaris doesn't really, they don't have a lot of four-wheelers in the racing world necessarily. So it's kind of funny when you see them. I mean, I know that's how I did when I seen them, just kind of curl my nose up at it. But other than its looks, I think it looks pretty sweet. But there's two different models of this. But I mean, obviously there's some smaller ones too. But as far as in this class here, there's a Outlaw 500 and an Outlaw 525. And this one obviously is the 525, but it's the KTM motor. And that's a real important part of it, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But it's and there's also this is the independent rear suspension model. There's another one that's a straight axle. There's a little bit more on that here shortly too, but they are, other than that, there's not a whole lot. I mean, obviously the frame and the brakes and all that stuff, through Polaris, but for the most part, that was kind of what sparked my interest in these things. So anyway, a little bit about that motor, and I'm not a big motor guy, but I do have spent some time on dirt bikes and stuff, and if anybody has ever rode the KTM 525s, you'll know it's a great, it's an awesome motor. The old RFS motors, they got a long stroke to them. You can kind of tell by looking on the outside of this motor how it does, but it's a real beefy motor. It's got a lot of power, a lot of bottom end power. You can lug it around, but and when you want to open it up, it's got a lot. So that the motor alone is really what I was after, and I was just curious to see how it does on a four-wheeler. I ride a lot of woods, or did ride, don't do as much anymore, but so I don't do a lot of track riding stuff, and racing four-wheelers aren't they're not the best for the woods. They're just set too low or too high strung, and gearing's way off. They're just not set up for it. But there was plenty of boys rode them in the woods. But this one, what makes this one neat is it's got I think it's like 10.5 inches of clearance. You can kind of see there on the back the clearance from having that independent suspension, which is sweet. So in the woods, this thing's a blast. It's just like riding a racing four-wheeler, but it's not got you're not beating the sprockets and the brake disc out of pieces every time you go across a rock or whatever. It really feels like your four-wheel drives as far as your clearance and the way it rides through the woods. But it's nice to have the clutch and just like you do on your racing four-wheelers. But it's a blast in the woods, and that motor, it makes all the difference in the world. It's got good lug, but when you can climb some good stuff with it with the power it's got. But I know a lot of people talking. I don't have experience with the straight axle ones, nor do I have experience with the 500s. But now I can just tell you from what little bit I've heard, I mean, the 500s are not much count. But I wouldn't have messed with it anyway. With just the 500s, there's just not enough there to interest me. But with this motor, it's pretty sweet. I hate they didn't make it no longer than they did. And also I've seen people talk trash on the independent suspension, and most of it's from track guys, which I get. I mean, they don't sling around as quite as easy as the solid axles, I guess. And there's some pretty significance in having that solid axle in racing and track riding. So I get that part, but just in my experience in the woods, I think man, it's a fun ride. So if you come across one of these, don't hesitate. I mean, obviously they don't look a lot like this one. This one's got a lot of aftermarket plastics, and obviously the pipe and hand guards and front bumper and all that stuff, and skid plates. But this one was done right. I mean, it was definitely set up for some woods type riding. So yeah, just if you're looking at these, you won't see them pop up very much. But if you find one like this, and that motor's not a bad motor to work on either, but there's not a lot of big problems with them that I know of in the dirt bike world. But they're definitely you're definitely you would want to pay more for this than you would the actual Outlaw 500. Just always look into that. But most of them you find, they'll advertise that they've got the KTM motor on it or whatever. I think this one's called the Outlaw 525 RRS for the independent rear suspension, and the other one is a S model, I believe. But if you get a chance to throw your leg across one of these, you ought to try it out. Thanks again for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more.